be agreed to, and I call the member for Bennelong.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. What I will get up and do is outline the solutions that this government has put into place. And what we heard there from the member for Petrie was 5 minutes of absolute drivel and not one solution. Then they do that in question time, they do that in Parliament, they do that in this chamber, not one solution. And I'm not surprised, because it's no different to when they were in government, Deputy Speaker. No solution for the cost of living crisis, no solution for rising inflation, and they just sort of went on their merry way and left us with $1 trillion worth of debt and a cooked economy. And that is a stark contrast to what the Albanese government not only took to the election, but what we have delivered in our short 10 months in office, because we have and had a strong plan to address the rising inflation and cost of living crisis in Australia, which the former government left neglected and unaddressed for a decade. After a wasted decade of Liberal rule, the new government has inherited an economy with costs of living going through the roof. Under the previous government, we saw wages sit still for 8 years, one of the most prolonged periods of wage stagnation in Australian history. Under their watch, costs of living skyrocketed and they had no plans to address it. Under their watch, the national debt doubled and Australians across the country found it increasingly difficult to make ends meet with each passing year. All this from the so-called party of economic management. They spent a decade sitting on their hands on our economic future with their wasted opportunities and warped priorities. They left our country with falling real wages, cost of living pressures and $1 trillion worth of Liberal debt. Well, Deputy Speaker, thank goodness we now have a government with a plan to tackle the cost of living and to be disciplined enough to deliver budget repair, which will put downward pressure on inflation. And we understand that the rising cost of living is hitting Australians hard. And we're not going to sit idly by while Australians suffer to make ends meet. This is why Bennelong elected me and why Australia elected a new government, to deal with the last decade of neglect. We have a plan to relieve cost of living pressures, repair supply constraints and deliver responsible budgets to put downward pressure on inflation. The government knew this from the very start, that we needed to take immediate action to fix the economic bin fire that the Liberal Nationals left in their wake. And that's why the very first act of this government was to support a minimum wage increase, sensationally opposed by those opposite. 2.7 million Australians are better off because this government backed a wage rise for our lowest paid workers. And then in our first budget, we reinforced our commitment to ensuring we continued with a responsible and effective cost of living relief plan that didn't put extra pressure on inflation. We have legislated cheaper childcare. We've expanded paid parental leave. We've brought down the price of medicine. We've got wages moving again, and we have a plan to deliver more affordable housing. We brought in the pension of work bonus so that older Australians can keep more of what they earn without taking a hit to their pension. And we brought the Parliament back to legislate a cap on power prices, another cost of living measure that those opposite oppose. We have done all this whilst being responsible economic managers. While the Liberals would consistently blow budget revenue upgrades, this government did not. In the October budget, we returned 99% of revenue upgrades to the budget compared to the previous government's average of just 40%. This is responsible and doesn't add further pressure on inflation in our economy. We've introduced legislation to drive investment in cheaper and cleaner energy, putting downward pressure on power prices and again opposed by those opposite. And under the Albanese Labor government, there'll be more university places and fee-free TAFE, ensuring we're getting more people trained into the jobs they need to be in, all outcomes of the Jobs and Skills Summit opposed by those opposite. We've introduced the National Reconstruction Fund, investing in Australian manufacturing and industry, again opposed by those opposite. And in May, the Treasurer will deliver a budget including direct energy relief that those opposite voted against. With all this hard work, there are encouraging signs that inflation has peaked and will start to moderate throughout the year. Australians know that this government didn't create the economic challenges we face now. The former government had 10 years and they wasted each and every year, left us with $1 trillion worth of Liberal debt. The Australian people trusted us to fix these issues and to take responsibility for addressing them, and we are.
The question is that the motion be agreed to, and I call the member for